already on the on the Hangout with us. Let's see. It looks like we have Linda and Anna here. I'm Mark Young. This is Heido. So today, the topic of today's Hangout is trends in journalism. Talking about what current trends are and what journalists might be doing in the future. So if you have questions for us, you can, there's a Q&A app in Hangouts. You can post them there, or you can, if you are one of the people who's participating, just go ahead and chime in and ask us your question by talking. Or, Linda says a bunch of people are in other wrong chat group right now. Okay. Let me see if I can figure out what that is and maybe get them over here with us. So, all right. Let's see. I got a thing from Linda, so we'll add her. All right. I'm just going to go back over here and, oops, wrong one. There we go. Got one more person to add. Okay. So if anybody's watching on the YouTube channel or and you're not actually participating, or you know people who are, apparently there's a different chat that people are in. I can't see it right now in Hangouts myself, so if anyone can get a message to those folks who are in the wrong chat and let them know, that would be great. And in the meantime, we'll just start answering some of the questions that we have, and hopefully people will find their way over here in the meantime. So we got a few questions sent to us via email, so maybe I'll start out with one of those, and then if hopefully some other people will join us and ask some new questions. But the first question actually came to us from a couple of people. I'm probably going to pronounce your name wrong. Ansis in Latvia. Ansis. I'm going to stop trying to pronounce it because I'm sure I'm doing it wrong. And Linda, both of them in Latvia, wanted to know what the future looked like for papers and newspapers and magazines. And I mean, I can only speculate and guess. You know, Hai and I both come from a newspaper background, and so you know, I think we can both say from personal experience that in the last 10 years, newspapers have seen their readership numbers, the circulation numbers declining. Advertising numbers are also declining very quickly, not surprisingly, since fewer people are actually reading the printed copy. And the advertising on the digital side, while it's growing very quickly, people aren't paying as much for online or digital ads as they were paying for newspaper ads. Newspaper ads were and still are very expensive, whereas digital ads continue to be relatively cheap considering the number of people that you reach. So for that reason, newspapers are, in the U.S. anyway, are having a really hard time. A lot of them are laying off journalists, you know, cutting back the number of days that they actually print a paper. Some of them are trying to go digital only. They're not printing a paper at all. You know, and just printing smaller newspapers. So, you know, I can't say for sure, you know, what direction what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, but I would say that's probably a trend that's going to continue. And newspapers are going to have to figure out ways to get by with a much smaller revenue stream. Like I said, digital advertising is okay. Sorry, I'm getting a call right now from. Let me see. Let me send the message here. Okay. So, anyway, so there are signs that newspapers are figuring out ways to make more money online, but like I said, it's not going to probably ever replace the revenue that they were generating before digital platforms came along. So they're finding ways to diversify their revenue streams. But I guess in short, what I think I'm saying is that I don't think that I don't think newspapers are going to survive the way that they did, the way they flourished in the 20th century. They're going to have to be smaller. They're going to have to, they're not going to have the budgets that they have before. So let me go ahead and send the invitation to folks again. Okay. So, Hai, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that more and more what you were saying, it ended up newspaper and magazine become more like a niche products in which they would cater to a very small audience and who's still looking to receive it on the existing form. I mean, that's the trend in the U.S. I mean, what Mark said, everything is absolutely correct that we've seen for the last decade. What I'm curious is that how is it going in Europe? Where you from? Is that the same trend that mirror the U.S. Is going on in your country at this point? Linda, I mean, Anya?
Okay, let's see.
Linda, could you hear us?
So yeah, does anybody out there care to comment on what the economic state for newspapers and magazines in Europe is, since that's kind of outside of our realm of experience? All right. All right. Mute that. Okay. Okay. All right. Since nobody seems to want to chime in on. Oh, I'm sorry. The question was what happening as far as the economics of newspapers and magazines in Europe, printed media in Europe. As Hai and I just said, in the U.S. anyway, that they're seeing revenue drop, and there's a lot of layoffs and people getting fired basically, and news organizations having to get by with fewer journalists. Linda chimed in and said newspapers in Latvia are having a very hard time right now. They're trying to go digital, but it's hard to compete with already existing news portals. And that's okay. So, does anybody else have a comment on that? Or and one thing I'll mention again, if you're not talking, if you could please mute your microphone so that we don't get all the background noise. That would help us a lot. So, but if you do want to chime in, please unmute your microphone and just jump right into the conversation. So, if nobody has an additional comment on that subject, I guess we'll move on to the next question. Which media trend do you think will outweigh by the end of 2020? Asks Violetta in Serbia, and why? I don't know. Hai, do you have any thoughts on where we're going to be in 2020?
I mean, it seems to be fairly apparent that mobile is going to be the dominant trend for media consumption throughout. You know, as you can see that. You know, we're starting now in this industry in which we have like the portal like AOL and Yahoo, and as progress is making now the most dominant platform for people to, in a way, to interact and receive news would be Facebook. And Facebook itself has to completely retool what they do to cater to the mobile audience, because people are increasingly become more mobile. It means they can move from one place to another. And that was the one device that they carried with them. When you think about it, a mobile device is possibly the first things that you get up in the morning that you touch, and possibly the last things that you touch before you go to bed, and in between, the likelihood that you would have it with you all the time. So at this point, it seems to me that by the end of 2020, mobile will possibly is the predominant platform for people to receive news and information and to connect with each other.
Yeah, definitely. As you said, our mobile devices are fairly ubiquitous, meaning we have them with us all the time. I think that do you think that's going to change how? You think that will affect the content that we produce?
Absolutely. I mean, I really think that it affects the content, because you no longer deal with a broad sheet of papers, but you're dealing with a small device, like a phone, in which there's only so much screen space that you can see. So what it means is that the sentence has to be shorter, I think. The content has to be more visual, and the loading time has to be faster. So all these things come into play as how we present information. So you have to think about shorter content, quick, easy to understand, visual, so people can receive real quick, and also the load time has to be much faster because you connected on cell technology throughout. So that will affect how we present it. We cannot have so many things, so many bells and whistles coming with content the way we used to.
Definitely. And I know from what we're doing on voanews.com is we used to think of Twitter and Facebook as other ways to reach our audience and hopefully send them back to the website. We're not thinking that way anymore. We're really thinking of we're thinking of Facebook as just another platform, just like it's like another website that we have. In a sense, I mean, so we're posting content there that that's meant to be consumed there. We're not so much hoping that they'll come to the website from there. We don't expect them, I guess, to leave Facebook, and the same I think is going to be true with Twitter as well. That especially with video, we're finding a lot of success posting short videos to Facebook that. They're not really intended to be advertisements that get people to go look at a story on the site. It's really we're not expecting them to leave Facebook, because I think the statistics show that people aren't inclined to leave Facebook. They just want the short bit of information that they get on Facebook, and they seldom go to the website. So, again, we're thinking of it just as another platform on which we put our content. In fact, Facebook just recently started with several news organizations in the United States. news organizations like the New York Times are publishing content directly to Facebook. They're not necessarily putting it on their website. They're not hoping that people are going to come from Facebook to the New York Times website. So I think that's a pretty big change, that we're thinking about publishing our content on a platform that we don't own or control. We have access to it, but it's not ours. We don't put ads. If we were a traditional news organization anyway, we wouldn't be thinking about selling advertising. Facebook sells the advertising and then gives a percentage of that revenue back to the news organization, again, like the New York Times, but they take a cut too. So again, another example of how this new era of news publishing, everyone is getting a cut. So.
And sort of on the same vein, I oversee a slightly different website than my colleague Mark. I oversee Voice of America Learning English. And what we've also been trying to experiment with slightly different is that for the longest time we've always been posting a really short post to our Facebook, trying to engage the audience, trying to prompt them to click on the link to come to our site. And recently, because of the change in Facebook, what we also try to experiment with something else different. Not only do we use a short post trying to entice them to come to the Learning English site, we also post a sort of a mini story. Same time. So we're trying to assess whether the longer post with more information or the shorter post that prompt a user action is a way to go. Then again, it comes back to the question is that where we're going to go in the future. None of us really know, because we pretty much, I feel that we, in a way, as information provider, we have to go where our audience is, in a way. So it depends on how they receive it. So the best way for us to do is experiment with different type of content and different way of delivering, and to see what works. So for the last couple of weeks anyway, what we've been trying to do is we're giving both short and long posts to see which one will engage our audience better. And so we do it multiple times for the same content. And that's a way to do like A/B testing, and at the same time to see how effective it can be.
Yeah. Another way that we're finding, just a minute, I keep getting a video call from Arta. She's having trouble joining. So let me just send her a quick message here. Okay. Another way that this push toward mobile has helped journalists is we're actually, mobile phone is a fantastic reporting tool. We're actually, so for example, last week on Friday, the Supreme Court in the United States handed down a decision on gay marriage, basically changed the law across the entire United States and said gay people have the right to get married in any state in the United States, whereas before it was only about, I think about half of the states in the U.S. Gay men and women could get married. So our reporter was up outside of the courthouse, the Supreme Court building, and as soon as the decision came down, he shot a video on his phone and sent it to us. He basically did what we call a stand-up, where he held his phone out in front of him and did a report with people in the background. And so we were able to post that within minutes of the event happening. Whereas before, a camera crew would have had to have gone out, shot the video, then somebody would have had to come back and edit it. all that can now happen in a matter of minutes. So our reporters now are being trained to do that. They're taking a day-long class in how to shoot and edit video on a mobile device like an iPhone or another mobile phone, and it's helped us be a lot more immediate with our coverage. We're able to have video and photos from the scene of a news event again in a matter of minutes. And it happened again this morning. There was a report of a shooting here in Washington, D.C. It turned out not to be true. It was I guess a false alarm, but our reporter got to the scene very quickly and started sending us photos and video, and also started tweeting what she was seeing and what was happening, so we could very quickly incorporate that content into her coverage. And then, of course, there's the whole citizen journalism aspect of it, which I know we talked about a month or so ago, and being able to use content from people who aren't actually journalists, but they happen to be near the news event that's happening and posting things to Twitter and Facebook and other social platforms. And news organizations are having to figure out how to ethically use that and lawfully use that, because if I take a photo and I'm not a reporter, I own the copyright to that photo. So news organizations can't just take it and use it without my permission. So that's another way that that I think things will continue to change between now and 2020. So let's see. A couple comments have come in the meantime. Let's see. Anna in Romania said, in Romania some of the big newspapers already went online, but we still have a few print ones during local elections. Certainly, yeah. And I will say here in the U.S., I think local newspapers are having a little more luck as far as they're not seeing the big hits that a lot of large news organizations are in terms of advertising and readership, because a local news organization, often they're one of the only news organizations covering a community, and so if people want to find out what's going on in their community, they those newspapers are still one of the best ways to find out. Although certainly bloggers and citizen journalists, and the fact that community organizations like schools, police departments, local governments, they all have the ability right now to communicate directly with people more easily via their websites, via their social media accounts. So certainly that is also impacting the ability of news organizations to have so-called exclusive information. So let's see. Are your journalists multi-purpose? Are they both journalists and cameramen? Yeah, like I just said, something we're trying to get people to do more and more is use their cell phones as their camera, as a reporting device. We're training people to do it, and even before that, we and other news organizations started expecting journalists to do more in terms of 10, 15 years ago, if you were, and I can probably speak to this more than I can even, if you were a photographer at a newspaper, you took photos. That's all you did. You didn't shoot video. You didn't write stories. But we have at VOA we have people who have primarily been broadcasters, so they've done either TV or radio reports. But we're asking them to do everything now, to write a text story. In addition to the TV packages that they produce, and often these same reporters are both using the camera, they're writing the story, they're posting stuff to social media, so that they are really doing a bit of everything.
Right. I mean, it's funny that we said that this 10 years ago. I remember I went to for a meeting with a journalism school in Philadelphia. I came from Philadelphia. And I remember during the meeting, when I had with the chair of the journalism department and also the dean of the school, and they were laying out what they call the magazine track, the newspaper track, the photography track, And so the education back then 10 years ago was very rigid into one area for the other. And I remember I said to both of them, I said, you know, you would need to change completely if you're going to create a new breed of journalists for the modern age, because the day of having a photographer, a magazine writer, an editor, or person who can only do one narrow area of journalism is long gone. And you need to prepare new journalists to be able to do everything. And that has borne out to be true, that by the time I left the newspaper in Philadelphia and came here to work, virtually every single person at the news organization where I left did everything. They become photographers, reporters, editors, and they would go out, they would shoot on iPhone at the time. They would shoot video clip, they would shoot pictures, they would tweet our story as it happened, and then they would send short paragraph of story that they write. By the time they get back to the newsroom, the same reporter will assemble it together along with the editors and create a long form story. So the same person is now expected to pretty much do everything, and you know, from photograph, from shooting video to writing story, posting on the internet, sending things out on Twitter and Facebook, and trying to push information through social media all at the same time. So that's what our business has gone to, in which we all expect to. And the reason why is that I think that technology has enabled us to do things so much easier. As Mark said at the beginning, it used to be, if you want to do a stand-up in the Supreme Court, you have to send a big crew with a sound person, a camera person, a microwave truck, reporter, and producer. So you have a crew of maybe 5 people just to do a live report from the Supreme Court. But now a single person with a video camera, with an iPhone or a smartphone, can literally transmit everything live as it happened. Mm-hmm. So technology in itself has enabled us to move at the pace that we have, and it's moving pretty quick. I mean, I still remember the first day when the iPhone came out until now. It wasn't that long ago. Was that 6 years ago?
It was 2007.
2007? Yeah, 7 years ago. So it's moved quite a bit since that first day until now. Now it's in everybody's pocket.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Okay, so we have a lot of, let's see, so Angela says in Serbia we have the following trend that is new to us. Traditional media, particularly newspapers, are heavily influenced by politics and marketing agencies. This is why serious and investigative journalism currently exists only in the media who are online. Internet is the only place that is completely free from censorship. And what is even more interesting, these media are not classical media companies. They are mostly financed like NGOs through projects. What do you think about this? Yeah, as we said kind of at the beginning, right now traditional media companies, at least newspapers especially, newspapers and magazines, are under a lot of pressure to figure out how to make money, because if you don't make money, you can't pay journalists to work for you. And so, even in this country, we've seen a lot of nonprofits or NGOs, nonprofit news organizations, start up as a way to do journalism without the pressures of figuring out how you're going to get enough advertising to pay all of your bills. So I know that there are several investigative journalism organizations in the United States that have started out. One of them that a former co-worker of mine went to work for is called California Watch, and they, not surprisingly, focus on California, and they do investigative stories about what's going on in California. And it's they get their funding by getting grants and donations. And that model, actually, the grant and donation model, isn't really that new. I mean, that's how, in this country anyway, a lot of what we call national public radio in this country, most of that is actually, they don't get really all that much money from the U.S. government. They get actually very little of their budget comes from the United States government. It mostly comes from the membership drives, which they do every quarter, where they basically ask people, send us some money so we can keep broadcasting, and it's actually been a fairly effective I can't really call it a business model, but that's how they pay their bills, is by asking people for money, and people value it enough that for now anyway, they're willing to give them money to keep them in operation. So like I said, it's not really new, but we're seeing more and more of it in this country, in the United States, since traditional news organizations are struggling to make money the way that they did 10 or 15 years ago. A question from Linda, or a comment perhaps. Most of the newspapers have online versions in Latvia by now, but the problem is they don't have enough audience to cover costs of maintaining. This news portal is good quality because people request not only copy and paste news from newspapers, the printed version, but that's what's happening right now. So they need staff but can't afford it because the audience is small. Yeah, that's again, that kind of mirrors what happened in the United States when most online news organizations started, and when traditional news organizations began, as they were, like a newspaper, for example, was fortunate in that it had a stream of content that was being paid for by another revenue stream. So a newspaper, for example, was making enough money selling newspapers that they could afford to put the website up, and even though the advertising revenue and other revenue from the website wasn't really enough to pay for the maintenance of the website and all the other things that cost you money when you run a website, they were still able to afford it, and they did it because they realized that that was kind of the direction that media was heading. Although, again, it hasn't turned out too well for them, since the advertising revenue from online just has never caught up to what they were making from selling newspaper ads. So, let's see. What do you think about drone journalism? Asks Angela. I don't know. Ty, do you have any thoughts on drone journalism?
Well, in the U.S., they're beginning to. I mean, it's starting out. First, I think is a great vehicle for news coverage. When you think about it, the old day, in order to get aerial shot or to do any of those things, you have to go out and rent a chopper and get up at great expense. And I think that the drone has enabled us to provide the same type of coverage from a different vantage point at a very low cost. Again, technology comes into play, and I think it's great that we have that. Given what we said, though, there is because of the accessibility of drone is so inexpensive. For $1,000, you can go out and get a very high quality drone. Literally anybody can go out and get one. So you ended up with so many, it's going to be one of these busy skies in which there's so many drones running, flying around, and potential for danger to the public is going to be there. So I think in the U.S. there's beginning to be a movement, and they have already started, that kind of license news organizations to be able to use drone for news coverage. I think it's a good thing, because I think that it's inexpensive. It gives you the ability to provide, the coverage that would have been so expensive to do it otherwise. But I think there need to be some sort of either self-regulated or some sort of regulations from officials in order to prevent danger to the public. And I think that we are moving to that point in the U.S. right now. There's an experiment. I believe there's several news organizations have been licensed, and several private citizens have been licensed to operate a drone beyond the immediate area of their property and houses. So I think it's a good thing.
Yeah, and there certainly will be, in addition to the safety concerns, there's also some privacy concerns too, because if I have a yard that I have a big fence around so that people can't see into it, but somebody can just fly a drone, a news organization can just fly a drone over the top of the fence, and it's not on my property, it's just way above my property, but they can film anything they want. That's right now it would be considered a violation of my privacy, because I would have the reasonable expectation that people can't see over that fence. But if drones become commonplace, maybe that expectation will go away. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Another question: do you have a lot of live real-time reporting? If yes, what kind of equipment do your journalists use, and do you practice Skype Live? Let's see. We already talked a lot about the iPhones and the mobile phones, and we're trying to get our reporters more comfortable using that tool. We do use Skype for interviews right now when we can't get a person to either get to them in order to do an interview in person, or if they can't come to us. So for an organization like VOA, that's actually a really important tool, because most of our journalists are here in Washington, but we're trying to cover the entire world. So being able to do a Skype interview with people in Europe or Africa or other parts of the world has helped us a lot. But I'm not sure without Skype Live. If you mean like a live report via Skype? We haven't been using that. What we have been experimenting with is something called Periscope, which is another instant online video tool. So when the earthquake happened in Nepal back in April, we have a reporter who is based in Hong Kong, but he immediately left to go to Nepal to report. And he actually, I think, was probably the first VOA to do Periscope reports on his attempted journey to Nepal. And it ended up taking him a couple days to get there, because the earthquake damaged airports so badly in Nepal that he couldn't fly in for a couple of days. So he literally spent hours circling the airport for a long time, and he actually did some Periscope reports from the plane as he was circling, and we're trying to find ways to make that more common as far as our reporting. It's right now, like I said, we're definitely in the experimentation phase, but I can absolutely see that being a regular part of how we do our jobs in the future. So.
Right, and then again, as bandwidth become more accessible, and technology enabled to, I think you will begin to see more in real-time reporting, as you mentioned. I mean, the pace of acceleration that you've seen is breathtaking. Because I remember it wasn't that long ago I would say in 1986. I mean, we could barely even get too much video onto a website to deliver to people, because bandwidth is so small that you have to crunch everything down to such a small, minute file, for people to even view it. And we have gone from that to now literally less than 10 years to live reporting from the scene,
right,
with the same smartphone. So I think as technology progress and as bandwidth become easily accessible and broader, you will begin to see more of that.
Yeah, and as the public becomes more comfortable using these tools as well, you're going to see more citizen journalism, certainly. And take for example what we're doing right now. We've tried on a few occasions to have conversations with our audience after events like the State of the Union, for example. 2 years ago, we did a Google Hangout after the State of the Union address to see what young people around the world thought of what President Obama had to say in that address. And so I think that's another way that you'll see this rapidly changing media environment drastically change how reporters do our jobs.
And just the fact that we're sitting here having a live discussion with you, and the same people who could easily using smartphone sitting in a park corner watching this live at the same time. And I think that's pretty much where a lot of what we do as journalists is going to change as how people receive it. There will be times in which people would no longer tie to the office in order to watch TV programs or to watch the news or receive information. They could easily be anywhere else with their mobile device, and it become a consumption device then, not just, so the same device could be a news gathering device and also a consumption device at the same time. So the point is that we need to go where our audience is, and our audience will dictate how we're going to move and how fast we're going to move and how we're going to deliver in the manual and the platform that they want to receive it.
Yeah, I think one of the greatest changes that the last 20 years has seen in journalism and in all media is that the audience is much more in control. It used to be you got a newspaper and you read whatever they decided to put in the paper that day, or you watched a TV news show and they told you what happened and they told you what the top stories were, and that was all their decisions. The audience could kind of influence, have some influence on that by whether they tuned in to a certain broadcast or whether they bought the newspaper or subscribed to that newspaper. That would have some effect. And certainly most news organizations did regular reader research. They would, we call them focus groups here in the U.S., where you bring in a bunch of people who consume your news, and you ask them, what do you think of the job we're doing? And people could write letters and things like that. But now the feedback is so often instantaneous. Just simply whether or not people are clicking on a headline gives you some feedback as to whether or not that headline is a good headline or the story is a story that they're interested in. And again, people can usually post comments to an article. They can have, there's all kinds of ways that they can have input into the news gathering process, again through citizen journalism and other ways. They can post comments. It really has taken a lot of the control of news out of the hands of news organizations, and honestly, I think it's a good thing. I think it's a very democratic thing for the audience to have more control over what news is called important. Sometimes, speaking for myself, I think the outcome of that isn't all good. I mean, I think I know I've talked about what I see as the problem with CNN and some other news organizations to be sensational and doing things that are reporting in a way that's just trying to generate as large an audience as they can, as opposed to delivering information that is actually important and useful to people. But you have to take the good with the bads. Okay, so next questions. How do you incorporate reactions from social networking sites into your news? For example, using embedded code to post tweets from people directly in news articles. Yes, we're doing that already. Again, with the story that we had this morning about the what was thought to be a shooting in Washington, D.C. It turned out, again, not to be true, but we embedded tweets from our own reporters. We embedded tweets from the U.S. Navy, which is the shooting was supposed to have happened at a U.S. Navy facility here in Washington. So we embedded their tweets, and on a lot of stories, we'll actually to get reaction from other people, whether they're what we would call officials, like members of the government, or people who are involved with the businesses that we're writing about, or just people, again, who happen to be near where the news was happening. We'll include that as well. So, hi, is Learning English using social media?
Yes, we embedded tweet and YouTube and a lot of social media into our article and our story. Sometimes we go even a little further. We frequently dialogue with our our friends and follower on Facebook, and we actually even reach out to some of the audience who dialogue with us, who will provide comment and bring something back. Like for example, we over Christmas we did a little story about the Christmas traditions, and we actually reach out to one of the person who follow us, and we using over Skype trying to get some comment and some input from the person and incorporate into the video we do to provide back to the rest of the world. And right now we're working on a project with a country in Kenya in which we have some of our followers that are writing to us, and we're going to in turn republish some of the writing after we vetted it onto the Learning English website. So I think the audience might play a big part in what we do, and social media play a big part in what we do. And we look at you, actually, we look at commenter and our audience as a source of news gathering at the same time. So I think, yeah, I think the audience should be a part and should play a big part onto what we do as journalists.
Definitely. Let's see. Moving down the chat stream here. Anna says, in Romania there are 3 media platforms that support themselves by fundraising from readers or by grants. These 3 cases are the only politically free publications from Romania. Is it the same in your countries? I talked a little bit about what's happening in the U.S. as far as what I would call user-supported or nonprofit news organizations. So I'm curious if that's something that's happening in countries other than Romania and the U.S. Are news organizations basically asking people for donations to keep themselves in operation? So if you have a comment, you feel free to just speak up. I mean, doesn't have to just be Hi and I sitting here talking. If anyone wants to chime in, just unmute your microphone and start talking.
But also, I sort of want to add a little bit. Anya that asked that question before. I'm not sure whether she's trying to say that the other media is not completely independent because they is supported by government.
Oh, I see what you mean.
Or other part. I also want to emphasize in the U.S. beyond media and organizations that are receiving funding and also donations from people, there's also a lot of free media in the U.S. that is still supported by advertiser or still supported by other means. So, I mean, like for example, pretty much all the network TV and major newspaper and a lot of smaller news organizations in the U.S. are completely independent and supported by whether advertising, circulations, or audience. And so it's not just, we have a free media beyond just the one that is supported by donation from readers. And I'm not sure whether it's the case in a lot of countries around the world. But I think that by and large, the U.S. might have one of the most robust independent news, environment of any country that I know of. So Anna, I'm not sure whether that answers your questions right there.
So we'll move on to the next question. Do you have a problem with so-called internet bots? In Serbia, political parties have hundreds of them. I'm guessing you mean like posting comments and things to articles. And we do have, since we have comments on voanews.com, there's a lot of I guess I think it's anecdotal evidence, I guess is what I would call it, meaning that there's not 100% confirmation of it, but that Russia, for example, and China have bots, or actually they pay people to post comments, to not just news websites in the United States, but all over the world, to put the the point of view of their country and make it seem like it's coming from just a regular citizen, either in the U.S. or from somewhere else in the world. So we do see a lot of comments that we suspect are probably not, or we suspect might be coming from some of those types of posters, whether people commenting. But since we have no way of knowing for sure, we don't, unless it's very obvious, we don't delete them. I mean, I would rather err on the side of having somebody whose legitimate point of view is something that seems to line up very neatly with Russia or China. I'd rather have them have the opportunity and the ability to have their opinion heard than to delete something. Because I think it's probably somebody's being paid to put that up there. Since it comments on articles and user-generated content like that it's very imperfect. So until we figure out a way to know for sure, I think we're going to err on the side of posting those things, unfortunately. So I don't know. Do you see that at all in learning English, or is that not really a problem?
Once in a while, we do have people, particularly when we have story that is sensitive in particular area. Like for example, anytime we would have a story about the South China Sea, in which there's a lot of countries with conflicting claims to the area. What we try to do is that we provide a free forum for people as much as they can, but when it becomes personal, when the attack becomes so outrageous and personal, those are the time that we would eliminate the comment. Mm-hmm. But by and large, we try to give our audience as much of a free rein as they can to air their point of view. And we just try, when they get too much, that's when the editor has to step in and exercise some editorial judgment whether the comment crossed the line into a personal attack, or it's so outrageous that it would offend the larger portion of the audience.
Definitely. And one last thing I'll say about that is I do know that as far as political parties in the United States doing things like that, I don't know if any political party is having people post comments, but I do know that some political parties, and I'm not going to point out which ones, have been caught, or let me rephrase that. There have been some instances where, because of the internet, it's been shown that letters to the editor of various newspapers, and just to explain that very briefly, most newspapers in the U.S. Will publish selected letters that readers send in. So they'll send a letter to the editor, and it's usually stating their opinion or commenting on something. And again, because of the internet, it was shown that a lot of newspapers published letters to the editor that used the exact same language. So basically, it was kind of like a form letter had been sent out, and people were asked to send this to their newspaper as a letter to the editor. It wasn't their words. It was so it was an effort basically to make it seem like there was a lot of people who felt the way that the organization that sent out that form letter. It was basically a way to push that organization's position in newspapers. So that does happen occasionally, perhaps more often than we figure out. But and again, that's a hard thing to really to prevent from happening, I guess, is probably the easiest way to say that.
But also, I think that the practice of journalism in the U.S., by and large, we try to prevent the multiple point of view. So when we write about a particular issue, just say about the gay marriage issues that just recently passed by the Supreme Court, even if the court, decision came down that it is now the law of the land, not only do we present what happened, but even in the decisions, we try to present not only the majority decision, but also the minority decision. Because I remember when I edited the story, I even gone out of my way to quote extensively from the dissenting point of view as a way to make sure that the coverage of our coverage is balanced. And the same with pretty much, I think, every story that we do in a controversial issues. We don't just present one party's point of view. It's not either Republican or Democrat, but we try to quote from both sides. So because of the fact that most of the story in the U.S. and most of the news article has already have that point of view presented within the article, so I think you see less of that party trying to create to kind of like spread that agenda by using bot to repeat that point of view again and again, because it's already in the article itself, in a way. So I think that is less so here that we can see.
Definitely. Let's see. Andrea asks, how do you measure audience for VOA News.com? We have a software that the one that we use is a product that was right now it's owned by Adobe. It used to be called Omniture. I think it's now called Adobe Analytics. But it tells us a lot of information about not only what stories people are reading the most, but it can tell us things like what country they're from, how long they spent on the site. In the case of video, it can tell us how long they watched a particular video. So, for example, we can look at a video and see that 50% of the people who watched that video only watched like the first 30 seconds of it, or something like that. So that's how we measure the audience on voanews.com. There are certainly other kinds of software for doing that. We used to use Google Analytics, which is a free tool from Google. And then there's another product called Web Trends that I've used at other places that I've worked. So it's always it's one of the things I like most, honestly, about web journalism and working on a website is you can really see that feedback as to what people are interested in, and it's really helpful. So let's see, other questions. But should you ask the owner of the Twitter account or YouTube video for permission to quote him or use his or her video? If we're going to embed a tweet in a story, because that person has posted it to Twitter and Twitter has an embed functionality built into it, we don't actually ask people if we can embed their tweet. The assumption is by virtue of the fact that they tweeted it publicly, and that Twitter, they understand that Twitter has that function. We kind of assume that that they're okay with us using that tweet. On the other hand, if we were going to use that Twitter, that tweet or a YouTube video, for example, in a TV report, anytime we would be taking the content out of its out of the way it was originally posted to the internet. So downloading the YouTube video, for example, or again taking a screenshot of a tweet. In that case, we would try to probably contact the owner of that content to say, I know you posted this to YouTube, but would it be all right if the Voice of America used it in a television report? Because then you're using that that content in a context outside of what the user intended when they posted it. So is that kind of what your policy is?
Yes.
Okay. Let's see. I think Andrea says, I think in Romania there are many media companies that are politically free, including my newspaper. So, okay. Arbor asks, what about blogging? I am interested to see your point of view on blogging, and is it widespread or it's widespread? From my point of view, I think blogs are just another tool that have, again, given a voice to people who, until the internet and the blogging came along, didn't have the opportunities that people who work for news organizations did. So it's again, I think it's a great democratizing tool.
Right, and also I think that what also happened is that in the early day of blogging, the reason why blogging was so popular initially was it's a quick and easy way for people to publish. But as content management system has become more streamlined and quicker, and you're beginning to see less and less of that. So blogging is no longer holding the type of position it was. It seems to me almost right now, blogging or website becomes so indistinguishable that essentially it's just another way that people are delivering content, and there's not that much of the distinction between it than it used to be.
That's a very
and it has a lot to do with as the content management system has become more and more streamlined and easier to use and quicker than the way it used to be. So it's almost like become intertwined, that there hasn't much to distinguish it at this point.
Yeah. Let's see. Linda asks, how do you monitor user comments section? Do you employ someone who keeps an eye on that? For voanews.com, we do have somebody who, his full-time job, 8 hours a day is reading and approving or deleting comments. We actually get a lot of comments on the VOA News website. We're between 3,000 and 5,000 comments every month, so he has a lot of work to do. And since he only does work 8 hours a day, and he doesn't work on weekends or at night, there are people who it's not their full-time job, but part of their job is keeping an eye on that kind of thing. So, on learning English, what do you guys?
Yeah, we do have a lot of comment, and we try to be responsive to the comment pretty much every day. We have a couple staff members who actually spend a lot of time answering comments and interact with the audience. The nature of our comment is somewhat different on the Learning English side versus the main VOA News site.
Sure.
A lot of our comment are actually questions from readers about the sentence structure, about there's two types of comment. The one that comment about a news article, we let it go. We pretty much publish it unless there's a question. We also have another type of comment that is very, regular on our site, which people dialogue and asking questions, whether the sentence structure is correct, whether the grammar is correct, whether the pronunciation, or whether some of the writing and things to do with learning English, question about learning. So we try to respond to those regularly, because part of our missions in learning English, which we try to teach and empower people with English, so they can learn more about the world around us. And so with those type of comment, we made it a priority. We make it a priority to answer right away and also to provide feedback to it, which we do very regularly with this feedback.
Okay. Let's see. How many users do you have per day on voanews.com? That's a good question. I don't know what the per day is, but in terms of page views in a month, the number is usually right around 3 million page views in a month. The number of users per day, it really varies widely. On Saturday and Sunday, for example, the number of people who come to the site is much lower. Usually Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays are the days that we get the most traffic. But a big news story can change that completely. Or if a VOA story, for example, happens to get on the Google News website, that can push the number of page views and users or visitors on the site way up. For example, there was a story about a year and a half ago. It wasn't, nobody really thought much of the story when we posted it. It was just about I think it was about Japan building an aircraft carrier, and for some reason it got 200,000 page views in a single day. It was just kind of crazy. So that can happen. But so about 3 million page views a month is what we usually average. So do you know what your daily user averages or?
We average about I think anywhere between 35 to 45,000 a day.
Okay.
On learning English, our number dipped slightly on Saturday and Sunday.
Mm-hmm.
It has to do with the weekend. People think that they should only learn Monday through Friday. So anyway, so some of the things that we do is that I start scheduling more educational component on weekend. Like we would be teaching people grammar on Saturday as a way to because I just think that people would have more time on weekend to do some more studying and learning English if they want to. So we start putting grammar article on Saturday, and then on Sunday we have issue story about American, for people to follow. So we try to bring those numbers up. But it's about 35 to 45,000 daily unique user that come to our site every day.
I will say that right now the website at the Voice of America that actually gets the most traffic is not the English site. It's the Hausa website, which is Hausa is a language spoken in Nigeria, and while Nigeria and most of Africa, the number of internet users isn't very high. I mean, people who have a computer in their home and it's connected to the internet. It's largely mobile traffic, and since we've recently started improving our mobile websites, the traffic to the Hausa website for VOA has just taken off. So that's
off everything else.
Yeah, it just blows everyone else away in terms of traffic. So so we figured out it's given us a way to reach people in a way that certainly VOA couldn't have done even 5 years ago. So that's
and also I think on VOA you have to remember there was 47 different websites that were administered by VOA, catered to different audience all around the world. So virtually every language around the world would have a different audience measure than what we would see. Mark is overseeing the English version. I'm overseeing the learning English version, and then there's another 45 different languages around VOA.
Let's see. One more question I've got here from Tatiana. One of the most popular media trends is the use of social networks as sources of information. How can social networks help journalists in their work? Which problems can they create for journalists? That's a great question. We've touched a little bit about using social media as a way to publish news and information and to reach audience, but and we also talked a little bit about using social media content, tweets and YouTube posts and Facebook. But one thing I'll mention is that it's also a great way to develop sources. Not that that just to take their tweets and embed them in your story, but I can think of one reporter that I work with who she's really good at reaching out via Twitter to find people to talk to about different stories. She tends to cover the Middle East a lot, and so since we're based here in Washington, she's had a lot of success finding people who are interested in talking to her about things that are going on in their country, and she's reached them via Twitter, and so that's just one simple way. As far as problems, certainly we talked, I know, during the citizen journalism section of the course about if you're going to use information that you find on social media, you have to verify that it is what it's representing is true. So if somebody takes a photo, for example, and says this is the scene from an earthquake that just hit New York City, you need to take appropriate steps. A journalist needs to take appropriate steps to make sure that what is depicted in that photo, for example, or in that what's being said in that tweet is true, because it happens. It seems like almost every day, news organization and often fairly well-known news organizations are being fooled by things that are posted to social media. So that verification part is absolutely is vital. Not just in terms of being wrong that one time, but just to ensure that your credibility, that you have credibility with your audience. If you make mistakes like that, the audience is going to not trust you anymore. So.
And I just want to add one more thing with my colleague. Another way that we do a lot, or I know how I practice a lot, is that we live in a very complex world in which what happened in one area of the world might not necessarily ring true to the other. And we ourselves as journalists, we don't know what's going on around the world 24 hours a day in different areas. So one of the tools I use a lot is that I would routinely sample different countries around the world and to see what people are searching for, to see what people are looking for. And that's a way to provide like a sort of a guide for me to make decision how we're going to cover what we're going to cover, because story of interest in different area around the world might ring true to the other part if I can bring that information and transport it from Asia to Europe so people can see. So that's another tool that we use, is to see what you're interested in from different parts of the world and bring that news and information out and present it to the other. So when I have some free time, I would just go over to Google Trends and try to see, okay, what's people in Hungary is interested in right now. And I go over to India and see, okay, what's people in New Delhi would be interested in reading. And that sort of give me an idea about what is playing well around the world. And it's also sort of guide your coverage at the same time. Because sometimes there'll be like, strange things you never heard of. And there's certain common thing too, like, FIFA is always a big topic.
Right.
On any given day, you can see that FIFA is one of the trending story anywhere around the world. So those are the given. So by learning more about the audience, what they're searching for, what they're looking for, it sort of gives you a broader perspective about the audience around the world at the same time.
Absolutely. Okay, let me see. I think that might be all the questions that we have. Let's see. I think, let's see, did I answer all the ones here? Oh, I'm sorry. So yeah, there are a couple here that were sent in by Esther. What do you think about the tempo of online journalism? So she's pointing out that online editors are under a lot of pressure to deliver a lot of content each day, and quality can sometimes suffer. Absolutely, as we talked about, we're asking our reporters to be videographers, photographers, to be social media experts in terms of researching on social media and also reporting via social media. We're also asking TV and radio journalists to write stories, and we're sometimes asking our print journalists to go on TV and talk about the stories that they've been working on. We're absolutely asking people to be good at, or at least be adequate, or good enough at a lot of different skills that, again, even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, people were being asked to do. So certainly a journalist is really going to have to be, like I said, have to master a lot more skills than they did when I started as a journalist anyway. And in terms of the pace, I'd like to say that that any good journalist is always going to be able to work quickly and accurately. I have yet to meet a journalist who's never made a mistake. I've certainly made a lot of mistakes in terms of coverage. One of the nice things about online journalism is that it's not printed in a newspaper somewhere that somebody has for the rest of their life. You don't have that permanent record of your mistake. You can fix it, and then if ethically, you should put a note at the bottom saying what was wrong with the story before. But you can correct things very quickly too. But certainly a popular saying as far as the speed with which journalism is going right now is that it's always better to be right than to be first, and I think that's always going to be true. But there are always going to be news organizations that aren't as careful as they should be. There's always going to be reporters, individuals, even at reputable news organizations that aren't going to be as careful as they should be. And finally, I would just point out, the New York Times prints corrections every day in their printed newspaper. So it's basically, I think it's just, you have to realize mistakes are going to be made, but at the same time, also realize that you really have an obligation to get it right, and getting it quickly should never be the first priority. Being right is always the most important thing.
One of the things that I do find that happen regularly too is typo, in which you have simple mistake in which people like reverse word and misspell things, and it will get through. And that is a given, that no matter how careful you are, the most careful organizations still have that kind of mistake. And with our readers, we will have a typo. They point out and let us know that the typo mistake that we make, and we usually acknowledge and fix that typo right away. And even among our staff, I've said to people, that try to get everything right, but being human, we always make mistake, and a lot of time we can look at the same words again, again and again, and we still ended up misspell it without even thinking, and let it go past. And there would be times in which 2-3 editors have gone through a story and still that misspelling or that typo is still going to get through. But the key for us, we always want to make sure we get the fact straight and get the fact correct and get it right. And then the other stuff, the mistake in simple mistake in typo is more tolerable, because being human being, we always do that. And I myself done that so many times. That, I said to colleagues that I came from a newspaper in which before a story go online, it actually went through 3 editors, and even with that, I still find mistakes.
Right. And as news organizations are shrinking, unfortunately, one of the places where they're cutting back is that copy editing staff. So it's online operations often never had copy editing staffs to begin with. So I kind of refer to it as practicing journalism without a net. You often didn't have those 2 or 3 layers of editors who are going to hopefully keep you from making mistakes. But I'll just say again, I think it's really important that when you do make a mistake, other than a typo, to acknowledge that you made a mistake, thank the person who pointed it out, and correct it as soon as possible, and if appropriate, explain why the mistake happened. Just this week, VOA posted a report out of Africa, and we quoted somebody who told the reporter that he worked for Doctors Without Borders, but then Doctors Without Borders contacted us and said, no, we don't have anybody with that, with that name, by that name, and we don't agree with what that person said. Well, it turns out that the person had kind of misrepresented himself to the reporter, and it's certainly there are editorial things that could have caught that, by somebody Googling that person's name to make sure that they were associated somehow. That's something that probably should have happened, I guess, but it didn't in this case. But we identified the mistake. We said this was done in error, and here's how the error happened. And again, talking about credibility again, your audience, I think, will, if you explain to them what happened, they will understand that, okay, I understand that's a mistake that has a reasonable explanation. So. What do you think about journalists marketing themselves and being available on all types of social media? Certainly with social media, journalists' personalities are kind of more out there. I think it's a fine thing for a lot of types of journalism, but I think there's also a danger to it as well, and let me try to explain that. Part of one of the things that a journalist should value about themselves is their objectivity and their audience's belief in their objectivity. So if if I were a political reporter, for example, I wouldn't go on Facebook and Twitter and post my political opinions all over the place unless I was a columnist, because even though I might have those opinions that I keep to myself, it would make it very easy for my audience to question how objective I was being when I was writing about a politician or a subject that I had heavily criticized before. So again, it's not that I might not have those opinions, but if I put them out there for the world to see, and it just makes it harder for people to think that I'm being objective. So I think that's one of the dangers of journalists being on social media without thinking about how their audience is going to perceive their professional work in light of everything that they're posting in something that's more it could potentially be unprofessional. Let me just leave it at that. But I do think it is valuable for journalists, especially in this day and age where people don't tend to stay at the same job, whether it's a news organization or a company that they're working for somewhere else. It used to be that people tended to stay at one place for most of their careers. That's not happening as much, and so having a reputation that's a little more portable is for a journalist a good thing. For example, a reporter who covers a sports team here in the U.S. that I tend to follow just left the newspaper he was working at to go to work for another newspaper in Buffalo, New York, covering a different football team, and so he is going to be able to take his reputation as a football reporter, and it's a little more portable for him. People might know him a little better as a American football reporter because of the work he did at this other newspaper, and his Twitter and his Facebook account will kind of be a record of his work and the kind of work that he does. So, do you have any thoughts on?
No, I think it's great that the journalists should build, their own social media presence. But I totally agree with you that depends on the nature of their work. They have to be careful. I mean, obviously, there's media personality that having a very definite point of view is their brand, is how they attract people to come to their programs and also their column. So if that is the arena where you play in, definitely you should be able to have your point of view very strong, because that's the attraction to bring people to your column and your show and your program. At the same time, if you are a journalist, your job is to present news and information, then you need to keep that balanced perspective, because you don't want people question, how balanced your reporting is, and people can always using that against you. So I think that, the nature of your job would be how you should present yourself to the public, And I caution that with our staff all the time. I said that we all might have very personal interests and biases to how we believe in a certain system, but we have to make sure that we do not present that to the public so nobody will question what we do.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's a common dilemma. So there's a fine line that we have to walk.
Definitely. And one last thing I'll say about social media is it's an opportunity for journalists to interact with their audience one-on-one. So people can ask questions on Facebook or ask questions via Twitter. And I think it's a great way for journalists to again, to interact, to build their audience and build somewhat of a personal following, which I don't think is certainly not a bad thing if it's done well. It's added value to the reporting that reporter does for the newspaper, website, or TV station that they do, and it's so there's a lot of I think there's more opportunities for social media to be a helpful thing or a good thing for journalists than a way to get in trouble. Though again, journalists do find ways to get in trouble using social media pretty often. So that's it for all the questions we have, and we've gone quite a bit over the hour that we planned. Unless there are any other questions, I think Hai and I will sign off. And as this is the last of the weekly web chats, I'd like to thank you all for participating today, as well as throughout the 10 weeks of the class. And good luck with the rest of your class.
And we look forward to see some of you here.
Yeah,
right?
Some of you will be coming in September for the fellowships here at VOA. So again, good luck, and have a great rest of the summer.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.